This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z. I'm Matt Fonslow, and, somebody was begging to get back on the show again. It seems like an attention type of... He's kind of needy, I guess. He's got this little YouTube channel you may have heard of, little website called Scanner Danner. I don't know. I've heard of it. I'm just kidding. There is not enough good things to say about this guy, really. I'd have to learn a second language. I think the world of a very good friend of mine, Paul Danner. Thank you for joining me again, sir.
Thank you. That's a nice intro. I appreciate that.
You sent it to me, so I just read it. I'm just kidding. Nothing of the sort.
The feeling is mutual, Matt. I think the world of you too, man. I think you're a pioneer for this industry, and you have been for a very long time. And it's hard to hear compliments. It's hard for me to hear that from you, as well as I'm sure it is for you to hear that from me. But I mean that. Like, I've known you for a really, really long time, way back in the IATN days, and you're well respected in this field. And when you speak, I want to listen. So, and I think this podcast is a great avenue for you to, get some good messages out there to the masses. And like I said, if you're talking, I'm paying attention, Matt. So
one of my upcoming episodes will involve a psychotherapist to help Paul. I really appreciate it, though. Thank you. Thank you very much for those kind words. And I guess since we're talking about kind words, let's toss out some kind words about NAPA, my sponsor, that I'm very appreciative of. How does NAPA support your auto care center through national marketing? NAPA will help build upon the already successful Know How for All campaign and promote auto care offerings and services to our do-it-for-me customer with support through sales driver promotions, optimized targeted media in local markets and proven channels. Give your repair facility an online presence with NAPA Online, generating millions of views per month. If you're interested in partnering with NAPA Auto Care and capitalizing on the NAPA Know How for All national marketing campaign, contact your servicing NAPA Auto Parts store. Here we are. I sent you a message a couple of days ago with an idea. The nature of it was a conversation on the phone with a fellow tech, another friend of mine. I was telling him about a car I was working on. And it was a Kia. It was a no start, cranks but does not start. And you could hear that it was firing out of time, or, there's some kind of a compression issue. So I did a relative compression test because it's easy. And I could see the every other look on the current ramps. So I'd have a high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low, which, is a very, very strong indicator that I have, bank to bank imbalance. It was a V6 engine and most likely cam timing. However, I lucked out, I feel that this was a push button start. And so as it's, you hit the button, it keeps cranking even when you've let off. So it's still cranking while I walk around the front of the vehicle, and I see bubbles just streaming into the overflow tank. So I go grab my exhaust gas analyzer and just sniff what's in the overflow tank. And I think I spiked 1,500 parts per million hydrocarbons. CO2 went up. CO went up. Like, this is hardcore head gasket issue, or maybe even cracked head, something like that. Serious. And they're wondering why I didn't put some sort of pressure transducer on it. I could figure out which cylinder it was. And I was thinking, and I not even thinking, I said, I really don't care. This thing is either coming apart or we are replacing the engine. We got cam timing out, head gasket out. I just don't care which cylinder is the culprit. I'm not sure I even care which bank is the culprit for the cam timing issue. This thing's done. You see it many, many times, almost like this over romanticizing maybe of diagnostic procedures. And what really hammered it home for me, it was on the way home, I saw one of your videos, and it was either, I think it was on YouTube, but it could have been, it could have been Facebook Watch, but I'm pretty sure it was YouTube, where you were catching a little bit of flack in the comments about coil swapping.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought coil swapping, like, you're going to have the coils swapped faster than you can get your PC booted up, get the leads, whatever test you're going to do on the ignition system. You already know. If it's so easy to lift and swap those coils, and it works, like it follows that cylinder, you're done. You know. Right. What else do you need to know?
Right. I know the video. It was recent, and it was YouTube.
Yeah. So I just feel like we over-romanticize some of this stuff where time is spent. And I understand, like, time for experimenting and learning, great.
Yeah.
But when you're there to make money and be productive, I just feel like a lot of time is wasted with these tests that we see at a training class or read, in an article. I felt like you were the perfect guest for this because I feel very strongly over the years you've displayed a very no-nonsense approach, and it's evolving always, approach to analyzing vehicles. And even though you very much have the ability, both with knowledge and equipment, to go to the higher levels of testing and analysis, if you don't need to, you don't. I love that, and I wish that was promoted more.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you, Matt. I think the conflict that I have when I'm producing videos is, who am I producing it for this particular moment? I mean, if it's in a classroom environment and I want to teach methods and ways that you can approach something, then I might break out all the high-tech equipment. So, and the reason I do that is, if that particular car we're talking about with the coil swaps, I believe it was on a Toyota, it was a coil unplug, it had a secondary ignition coil fault. If I had that in a classroom, then I would want to teach that group as many different ways as possible to recognize that fault. And start in low tech, and actually in a classroom environment, I may start with the higher end equipment to see if we can prove it first before we swap coils around. And maybe I use that approach because the intake manifold covers the coils and I can't do the coil swap. So approaching it, from that angle, you would need some more specialized equipment to do it. But if it's right out in the open, it's just as valuable to teach that method as it is, like you said, the romanticized high-tech equipment that we can see that fault. And it's funny, my slogan is "Don't be a parts changer." And you're right. One guy commented, "Oh, I see you were being a parts changer." I guess you're right. I swapped the coils and the problem moved with the coils. And like you said, I'm done. Like, that's still troubleshooting, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And another example that pops into mind, I had a Jaguar K8 with a left front wheel speed sensor issue. And, again, a friend I'm telling this about after the diagnosis is, did you scope it? It's like, scoping MR sensors kind of sucks. I'd just rather not. So what did you do? Well, in this case, I'm kind of a fan of the Wacom builds a tool, the 20560. Yeah, I kind of like that because not just even for me, everybody else in the shop, they get a ABS issue, traction control issue, wheel speed sensor. They need to test the sensor and the wiring and back to the module and maybe the module itself. They can unplug the sensor, plug this in. If it's a passive or a VRS style sensor, it kind of tells you if it's open or shorted.
Yeah.
And if that's fine, now you can spin it, the wheel, and it'll kind of tell you it's putting something out. And if it's an active sensor, you have to be aware of polarity. So you just flip the leads around. It's super simple, but it powers up the sensor. And it's, again, most MR sensors are pretty high resistance anyways, but you can spin it and see if it does something. And then if that kind of tests good, and even if it does, even if it doesn't test good, like you kind of have a sense that the sensor is bad, you can now plug it into the harness. And with the scan tool, simulate the sensor and look on the scan tool and see, am I reading something? And if you do, you've pretty much proven the wiring's good. And you can leave it go and manipulate the harness. That's what I found with the Jaguar is the sensor seems to be fine. When I plugged in to the harness, nothing was showing up on the ABS control module and the wheel speed sense PID. So quickly I went over to the right side just to make sure, the other side, and I could see something. So I go back over to the driver's side front, same thing, and I start putting my sensor simulation on that wire or the wires, and I start manipulating the harness. And I find that if I grab the harness just right and squeeze just right where it passes through the inner fender, I can get speed readings and kind of quote unquote temporarily fix the issue, proving that harness is bad.
Right.
No scope. I suppose I could have used a ohm meter or whatever, but this is all right there. Bang, bang. This is all done. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. If I am, I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to make it sound so simple. But this is all accomplished in 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops. And I know what's wrong with it. And I didn't have to go get fancy. I didn't have to wheel over scopes and MR sensors. Typically we're trying to look at current at very, very low current levels.
Right.
So, it's just like we get too caught up sometimes in these. I don't know if it's just trainers, but training content, the articles, they're supposed to entertain us. They're supposed to grab our attention. I think it's important to understand how those systems work. If I understand how it works and I understand what it might look like on a scope, that helps me not need the scope in this case. And I don't think I'm coming off anti-scope. I hope not.
No, I think from both of us maybe someone who doesn't know who we are would possibly think that, but the people that know who we are, we can't be anti-scope, right? We can't be. Like that's been our thing for a long, long time. But there's times I agree with you. You just don't need it. Like it's overkill. And I think sometimes it can lead to complications in your diagnosis when you learn some new technique. And I can't think of the specifics, but it was in one of the automotive groups, and a guy is having, I wish I remembered the exact scenario, but I'm like, why are you doing this particular scope test for this particular symptom? It just didn't make sense. In my opinion, it was a complete waste of time. I don't remember the specifics exactly. I think it might have been like a low power condition at wide open throttle only or something like that. And the guy's really focused on his in-cylinder pressure and relative compression. And I'm like, why are you doing those things without first looking at scan data and making sure that, what's your O2s look at wide open throttle? What's your mass airflow grams per second? What's your calculated load number? Stuff that you can do in the seat, the driver's seat with the scan tool. And he's already got the scope out and doing all this in-cylinder stuff. And in-cylinder pressure waveforms are probably one of the hardest things to look at and know for sure what your problem is. And I get that would be I think a prime example of romanticizing scopes is some of the in-cylinder pressure stuff. And like you said, for your head gasket one, I had a known head gasket failure on my son's car. This is a video we never produced, and maybe I will at some point. It was his old 94 Toyota Celica. I knew for a fact that I had a head gasket problem. And it started with an overheat from the car sitting. And then when we got it to my house, I pulled the rad cap off and, filled it up with coolant because it was low. And I just had my son crank it, and it shot out of the radiator 2 feet, like just on a crank. So I'm done. This head's coming off. And just like you, didn't care what cylinder. It didn't matter to me at all. And I was just going to pull it apart, and it's a driveway job anyway. But we ended up putting, just to see if we could identify what specific cylinder, I ended up putting a pressure transducer on the radiator and cranking it over and doing some checks. And I have to be honest with you, I couldn't make heads or tails out of what I was seeing. I had no idea what cylinder it was. And I could go back even still now knowing, once I had the head gasket off, I think there was evidence of at least 2 cylinders I just couldn't make heads or tails out of the waveform. So I wanted to try this fancy new, test for, okay, sync it with the ignition event and look at your pressure waveform. And there you go. There's your head gasket failure. And it was a waste of time. It was an absolute waste of time. You would have been better off in this scenario, for as bad as that head gasket was, taking the spark plugs out and putting air in each cylinder if you really wanted to know which one it was, and look for the bubbles. Done. So, agreed.
Another inspiration for this with you was a couple episodes ago with Tanner Brandt talking about in-cylinder on a friend of ours, that low compression, looking at in-cylinder and having like some of the experts at in-cylinder pressure looking at it, trying to figure out what's wrong with this cylinder. Why is it low compression? A lot of time is spent. And it's not bashing on the experts, because it's only going to tell you so much. I mean, we're looking at pressure. It's only going to tell you so much. And so they find out what's wrong with it with a borescope. They run a borescope down in the spark plug hole, look back up, and now it's just blatantly clear what is wrong with this cylinder. And it's one of those things where like you can't wait to use the pressure transducer. You've been to these classes. It definitely has a place in our diagnostic arsenals, tool arsenals. It's definitely got a place, but I think we got to be aware of what it's not going to tell you just as much as what it can tell you, and to not get so hung up on it. Like if it's not obvious, move on, find a different test. And if you have to, sit at home and go back and look at it, and maybe you can connect some dots.
Right.
I would caution people about that heavily, though, because sometimes you can come up with some really gnarly hypotheses that are not remotely correct. Seeing it happen live, it's so bad.
Especially live. Like if you're doing something live and you're looking at it, I think that's one of the difficulties I have at times when I'm filming my stuff, is I'm always doing everything live and I'm troubleshooting live. And sometimes I spit out some stuff that's just flat out wrong while I'm troubleshooting live.
Yeah, I did it in a class once. Luckily I heard myself, or I caught it like, whoa, stop, back up. Ignore that. That is so wrong. That was so wrong. I don't even know. It's like sometimes you get talking for the sake of talking, and bad, very bad.
Hey, and for anyone joining us now who thinks Matt and I are bashing scopes and newer testing methods, we are not. Just to jump in real quickly on an in-cylinder pressure test, since we're talking about that, I had a Lexus with a shifted keyway on the crank that had good cam and crank relationships. It had good everything else, and the in-cylinder pressure test was the one that allowed me to say, sell the job, pull the timing covers off, something's wrong in here. So just so you guys know, we're not bashing this stuff. We're just talking again about other ways. Let's not ignore the foundations of what auto repair has been forever in some of our newer testing methods, right? Let's make sure that we're taking the right tools out of our diagnostic toolbox and use them properly, but don't forget about the old tools, right? We have our 1/4-inch ratchet and 10 millimeter socket. Well, don't forget about the 10 millimeter wrench. Sometimes you still need to use the 10 millimeter wrench.
Yep. Or instead of, not to keep piling up on scopes or pressure transducers, but sometimes in lieu of that, grab the cylinder leakage tester.
Yeah. Or
grab a borescope and look with your eyes and see the issue. Hear it over and over again. Even if we backtrack to one of my first episodes about that Chevy truck that I'm pretty sure was a lightning strike. Initially, I'm scoping everything to try to find this network issue, and that was way the wrong angle, because I was kind of groomed to be very anti-ohm meter, just very anti-ohm meter. It turns out that's what saved me. That's what got me going on the path. When I fixed that issue, or, and it was a series of issues of different modules, but once I got kind of some of that taken care of, where now the resistance of the network is good, but I still had issues. Now I needed the scope. The scope was the only way I was going to figure out what else is contributing to my network issues.
I'm not familiar with that episode. So the resistance was off then?
Initially, yeah, is open circuited in the ABS module.
Yeah.
And, I'm scoping first, and the network is a mess.
Yeah.
And the way the network is set up, those modules, I can't just unplug modules and take them off the bus. I would have to jumper them. Well, there are so many of them. And then even with 2 U-test kits, AES Wave U-test kits, I didn't have enough jumpers to jump all these modules.
Right.
So Thornton and I were on the phone talking, just visiting really. And he's like, hey, you got anything cool going on in the shop? And I'm like, oh yeah, I got this network problem on this pickup, this Chevy pickup. Like I'm scoping it, and it's the biggest mess I've ever seen in my life. And kind of trying to jump some of these modules. He's like, why don't you measure the resistance? And it's almost, like a vampire in a crucifix, just like, don't swear. Yeah, I bust out the ohm meter and sure as the devil, it's way off. And so I start tracking it down that way, and I find that I end up replacing, a dozen or more modules on different networks. So the high-speed CAN had issues, GM LAN, or the low-speed had issues. I had a lot of weird sensor issues, like the mass airflow sensor was bad, the brake pressure sensor, vacuum pressure sensor is bad, like all these different things.
That makes sense. The pressure sensors would take a hit from the Lightning because their pressure sensors are a little module in themselves.
Yeah. Power steering, both the module and the steering angle sensor.
Oh my goodness.
It was crazy. Like it literally towards the end, it got to the point where if it set a code, we were just replacing it. We just stopped testing. That's how bad it got. And it just had to, luckily it was a pickup truck, so I could store all the old modules in the back.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But yeah, I had to dial it back. And
what's awesome is you have John Thornton's phone number. I'm stuck on that. You get to talk to John Thornton, like, hey, John, how you doing? It's Matt. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it's surprising how, we started out talking about cars, but eventually we'd not talk about cars at all.
I think we talked about this. I don't know if it was this one, but he was back in the guru classes in the early 2000s with Jim Linder. John Thornton was like the man that kind of set me on this path. Outside of like the training I had at my technical college, when I was there, I had an instructor, Dan Svitko, that was very, very instrumental in my life. And John Thornton would be the other one, for sure.
Are you a repair shop owner? Do you find yourself struggling with any of the following? Uncertainty about the future and competition. Are you spending too much time managing chaos and struggling with new employees? Do you lack time to invest in learning best practices, or there's no time to spend on effective marketing? How do your finances look? Are you reactive rather than proactive? Do you know where you should be, when to grow, when to shrink? If any of those situations describe where you are today, you are finally in the right place. Repair Shop of Tomorrow is NAPA Auto Care's newest endorsed partner. They are helping shops all over the nation run more profitable automotive repair shops by utilizing proven business best practice marketing and coaching to leverage NAPA programs to drive quality, car count, sales, and profits. Repair Shop of Tomorrow will look at productivity, efficiencies, effective labor rate, average hours per car, labor profit percentage, measure and manage labor, and how you can create net profit. Team up with coaches to create systems, operations, and procedures using a business flow chart to help you reach your goals. Repair Shop of Tomorrow will help measure and manage the results to help each business succeed. Best of all, it's not do it yourself. It's all done for you. Their goal is to help dealers do what they do best, fix cars and build relationships at the counter and in the community. Repair Shop of Tomorrow will take the other minutia off your plate. The Repair Shop of Tomorrow offers a tier-based program to not only generate more business today, but to transform your shop into a top-level shop of tomorrow. Repair Shop of Tomorrow can teach you how to make your shop profitable. They can teach you how to recruit and how to make more labor dollars for your shop. Interested in Repair Shop of Tomorrow? Call 440-545-1230 for a free 20-minute, no-obligation consultation, or contact your servicing NAPA Auto Parts store. Yeah, he got me injected into the kind of that Linder world. So then I meet Randy Dillman and Scott Manna and Aaron Keppen, like this group of super, super smart guys. And then IATN had me introduced to Harvey Chan and Matt Ragsdale and Randy Burnclaw. So it was a really, really good mix. Yourself included too, because you were definitely on the IATN side. And then Linder's, we weren't in the same guru class. Did you ever get to go to like Guru 2 or 3 or the...
I did Guru 1 and Guru 4.
Okay, Pico Guru.
Yes, because it was the Pico one. So I did the Guru 1. I didn't do 2 and 3, so I'm not sure what all was covered in those, but I did 1, and then I think a year or 2 later, I did 4.
Yeah, and you might have been in the inaugural Pico
I think it was the
Guru.
first one, yeah. Where Craig...
Schoenberger, yep.
He was there, yep.
Guru 2 was mainly focused. It wasn't nearly as long as Linder, the Guru School. Guru School was a week.
It was a week, yep.
Guru 2, Guru 3 were weekends. Guru 2 is focused heavily on scan tools, specifically graphing scan tools. Mm-hmm. So Thornton would be there demonstrating ease, and later, well, he might do a segment on ease, and then he would do a segment on IDS. And then Dave DeCourcy did the Tech 2. They would have representatives from Bosch might be there, OTC, Snap-on, kind of demonstrating how to graph with their tools and kind of the, if you will, power of graphing.
Yeah.
And Guru 3 was a lot more just, I don't think it was set in stone as much as 1 and 2, where 3, when I went, Randy Dillman was working for an independent Euro shop. So he did a couple of presentations on Euro vehicles and that world, which is completely foreign to us. Mm-hmm. Their tooling and the way they provide service information and some of the pains that he had gone through and some of the most mundane operations. And then Scott Manna did one presentation on, I think, active fuel management. So, and they were much smaller classes. You know, I guess Guru itself is a very small class. 2 would be great. Fairly, yeah.
It was some of the best training I've ever had, Matt. Like I said, outside of technical college stuff, like it has been probably still to this day the best training event that I've ever gone to. So that's props to Jim Linder for setting that up and his whole vision for all of that. So yep. The only thing I didn't like about it was, I think it was like Thursday or Friday, we went to the Indy 500 racetrack and we went around in the van, and that was cool, but I wasn't there to sightsee. I would have rather been home with my family for that final day. That was my only complaint of the whole thing, is like, I would have rather had some more training and then go home. Like, that's cool. Like, I just didn't, some people like that, but it's funny, like outside of what we do, I don't like cars. I just don't like, that's not my passion. I mean, the Power Wagon I have now has kind of changed that a little bit for me. So I'm kind of, but that's a unique like situation. And cars aren't my thing, man. I don't like, I want to go fishing and not think about cars. It's
more about solving the mystery, solving the puzzle, figuring out how something really works.
Yeah.
More so than the actual car. I really don't care about.
Isn't that awesome though? Like our field and puzzle solving. Like this is really not the subject. I'm sorry to change it. I mean, it matches, but I just did this PT Cruiser. I think it was like 2010 or something. I don't know. It had a parasitic drain, like a 1.2 amp parasitic drain. Kept killing the battery. Customer replaced the battery like 3 times before he got to my brother's shop. And, oh shoot, should I even be talking about this? This isn't produced yet. I shouldn't be talking about this. When are we producing this podcast?
That can be all edited up.
I think we'll just skip that for right now. I'll tell you, whatever. If somebody hears your podcast, then they're going to know up front what's wrong with this PT Cruiser. Whatever, doesn't matter. I'm going to still produce it. It's one of our next ones coming up. I think that's going on my website anyway, so it's not going to be viewed by the masses. And it's really crazy though, Matt. Like, it's one where like I said, the battery was changed a couple times, and then the guy brings the car, says, okay, it's got a parasitic drain. And then also my transmission's getting stuck in second gear. Well, long story short, somehow in the jump starting of the batteries or battery replacements, he messed up the engine computer. There was like no comms between the engine computer and transmission computer, but they're the same computer. There isn't a whole lot to do with this particular flow chart as far as what's going on here. Engine computer got messed up in the process, has nothing to do with the drain, but we think from repeated jump starts and whatever, that's he spiked it. But the power down window switch was stuck in the down position, which engine off's no big deal. But when you're driving it, that signal's always there, and that driver's door module is trying to put the window down all the time. So overheats the driver's door module. We think everything else works like it should, but the network was staying alive. So the driver's door module was sending a message and never shutting down it was CAN B network. That was what was killing the battery. If I'm doing parasitic drain testing, I'm starting with a thermal camera now. Forget the old school. I'm not even attempting to even look at this car without the thermal camera first. So that was key. Cluster's glowing red, radio's glowing red. Okay, great. We got direction. These are staying alive. Why? Pull up the network. Long story short, again, driver's door module was keeping everything alive. As soon as I unplug that driver's door module, everything goes to sleep. No more drain. All started from a window switch. I think that was the catalyst. The window switch being stuck in the down position, driver's door module trying to work that window kind of all the time. Don't know if that's what messed it up or not, but yeah. Anyway, that's
cool.
I don't know if you want to delete all that. I don't know where the tie-in is there. I guess that's one where we're talking about not romanticizing high-tech stuff and going old school. And old school says, disconnect the battery, put your ammeter in, start unplugging fuses. Well, we really, that method isn't really,
I just think it's
missed on today's cars.
I don't think it's so much even bashing new technology or new techniques. It's just that when the techniques don't have the productivity or the positive outcomes or immediate outcomes that you could in a different way, they're the older way. So one example that comes to mind is this is one of your, I think this is when you're still college, teaching at the college full time, I think. But you're talking about circuit analysis. And you go on a really nice rant, I felt, about the test light and how powerful that tool is. And how too often we're watching people forego using a test light. And not the computer safe ones. You're talking about the one with a bulb, probably a Harbor Freight's where the only place you're going to get one now. Yeah. That's got a real bulb, pulls, quarter amp or so, 250 milliamps ish. And how valid that tool is for finding electrical issues when used properly. And you don't have to be a genius to know when it's proper. Meters, yes, you got the number, but they don't load the circuit. Mm-hmm. That's a big problem. Mm-hmm. And maybe you end up using a meter in conjunction with a test light or a bulb that loads the circuit. That's fine. Talking about the thermal imager. Yeah. And it's newer technology. It's affordable finally. It's not so much new, it's affordable. We can afford to purchase one that's very usable in a shop now. And I don't know how many times I help with maybe the defogger doesn't work for the rear window. And, that they're in there with their test lights, they're in there with their meters trying to figure this out. It's like, well, wait a minute. Go to the thermal imager. Let's look at it. And you have, 3 grids that are lit up or, producing heat, this big gap, and then maybe the bottom 1 or 2 or 3 or however many is heating. Do we really care about anything anymore?
No.
We're not going to freaking fix it. Or we're replacing something, probably the window back there. Right. Do we really care about verifying power and ground? You can do it if you want. Right. But you don't need to be checking each individual leg, if you will. We're done. Same with the heated seats. It's kind of like, now I'm using this as a means to simplify my world rather than using a new technique, new technology, new test tool or piece of equipment that actually complicates things, makes things more complex, more complicated to sift through and interpret.
Right.
Can I shove air down this cylinder at the TDC compression and feel the air blowing out of the exhaust? Or am I sitting there with my scope and my pressure transducer trying to interpret this? And I just think it sometimes overcomplicates it. But then, like your example, that Lexus, that without the pressure transducer, that job just got way more complex, way more expensive to diagnose, because now you're tearing it apart because you don't know what else to do to visually verify your idea that this thing is out of time, but not the gears and the sensors. It's where the cam meets the gear is out of time. So now the pressure transducer was that almost necessary to make that a diagnosis without tear down.
Yeah. No, and that's one where, depending on the car, a tear down might be 4 hours just to get in that far, just to prove your hypothesis. That's awful. I definitely want to use something high tech to help me that says, that's not a hypothesis anymore. Look at this waveform. This is absolutely a timing shift here. Look at the compression peak compared to when the ignition firing event's taking place. This is wrong. We're absolutely going in. Get on the phone and sell the job to the customer. It's difficult to sell that job to a customer. Hey, we need, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, we need $500 to verify what we think might be wrong. And we want your okay to pull this cover off and check it, where the pressure transducer in that case was one that said, it's not a guess. We got to go in. We don't know what our problem is yet, but this is absolutely needed. And it's way easier to sell that job. Way easier.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of tools like that you end up buying that simplify a process, one that just popped in my mind was the, I think it's called Drive Align. It's a little laser that you set on serpentine belt pulleys to make sure they're all lined up equally. And how many belt squeals we've fixed, or how many repeated belt failures we've diagnosed with that tool.
Nice.
To see, Chevy, GM is notorious for the power steering pump pulley. We've had a couple of them where they're, of course, now when you see it's out of alignment, now it's obvious that somebody assembled it incorrectly, and it's whatever the component is not mounted properly. So it's way forward or way moved back.
Yeah.
Causing that belt to kind of have to bow in or out. But that tool, makes life easy. So it's really just kind of, I think, assuring people that don't necessarily have the equipment yet that they don't need to run out and buy it all the time. There's definitely stuff well worth having. Yeah. Thermal imagers, but don't maybe not use it to find misfires. Put it in the best position to, or put yourself in the best position to succeed using some of these tools. A pressure transducer. Yeah, should have one in the arsenal. Should you use it on every freaking misfire? No. I remember at Vision one year I think I was working in the Pico booth. And, I guess I keep bringing him up, but he was there legitimately. Thornton's there and Harvey Chan, and we're just visiting. And a guy stops by and he's like, "Hey guys, can I talk to you about this Ford pickup just murdering me? It's got a misfire. I cannot find it." And he has got, 8-channel captures of all the cylinders. And he's got mode 6 and he's got all this stuff. And John's looking at all of it and he goes, have you, hooked up a scan tool and looked at the power balance? Do you have IDS? At the time, IDS was really the only tool that did the Ford power balance really well. Now, other scan tools do a pretty darn nice job of it. But at that time, I don't think Autel was really well known.
They all sucked that power balance.
Yeah, this might have been like Autel 708 time, around there. And the guy did have IDS, and no, it was not. Hadn't been plugged in yet. And that was it. We're just kind of all done. Like,
right.
You have all this data you're trying to sift through. Why didn't you go right to that and have a little more focused attack? Like, okay, now I know this cylinder, or at least the PCM thinks this cylinder or this cylinder and this cylinder are misfiring. I can focus my attack on that and then use my scope with some purpose.
Yeah.
Step 2 with the scope. Now I have purpose. I'm going in with purpose. I have an idea what to look for. I'm going to try to rule out certain things. Being that it's a Ford, depending on where the cylinders are, coil swaps are, well within the realm of reasonability. Spark plugs. I don't know about you, but sometimes there's spark plug failures that cause misfires that I cannot see on a scope. I can't pick it up. Get frustrated, throw a plug at it, and it fixes it. And then you're comparing the both, and it's like, I don't see it.
Yeah. That's tough for sure. There's a balance with all of this too. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about, my YouTube community, and so many of them aren't professional technicians. Of course, my main audience would be directed toward technicians. I teach to technicians, but I have many do-it-yourselfers on there that say, hey, I can't follow what you're doing because all you use is scopes and all I have is a voltmeter and a test light. And an example I'm thinking of where you can use your voltmeter and test light more effectively once you see what it should look like on a lab scope. For example, a crank sensor failure, say it's a Hall effect, is going to be really, really difficult for you to understand what you're looking at with your voltmeter because it's going to average the signal. And then maybe when you watch a video where the guy's using the lab scope, you understand, well, that glitch that he's showing, there's no way that I'm going to ever see that with my voltmeter. And then you understand the limitations of your tool. Or another example might be a coil negative firing event, and I'm teaching a no spark analysis on this particular coil. Maybe it's a no start on an old school car. Maybe it's a single cylinder misfire on the newer systems. And I'm showing you that you can monitor coil negative control with your test light, and the test light should blink on and off. And you don't really kind of have a good visual of why. But if you watch a video where a trainer is going through that with a lab scope with coil control, and you can see the big voltage spikes in the control of that coil, it really makes it come to life for you. So, it really can go that direction too, is we can use the higher tech equipment, if we want to call it that, to teach us how to recognize certain faults with some of our lower tech stuff.
Yeah.
And then not forgetting, as we learn the higher tech stuff, we don't just throw away our lower tech methods because they're still valid and they save you time. And when you introduced this in the car you were talking about, that was a day where I got my ass kicked by this other car. My brain is fried, and I don't really want to work on this particular car that you're watching my son film me working on. My brother's just like, Paul, can you look at this car real quick for me? And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, yes, we're going to do it real quick. This is the method here. And let's get through this as fast as possible. And coil swapping was absolutely it on that car. And then you got people behind the scenes that, they don't know what's going on and they want all of that other stuff. And in my mind, I'm like, listen, I'm fried here. I just needed an answer for this car. And I just showed you guys a real quick way to find an answer. Done. End of video. And that's just what it was. And unfortunately, that's the way it is in my world. People don't see all of that stuff in the background, but that was my intent there. We can't forget the easy stuff to identify. And I think that's the whole point of your podcast here is we have all this new stuff we're learning, which is great. And we need it, but we can't just throw away all of our older stuff. Can't do it.
Yeah. It's how often are you going high tech and it costs you more time and effort than if you'd have went low tech, or now you're going back to the low tech to help support what you think you're seeing on the high tech.
Yeah.
I kind of rant about that. I feel like there's a lot of either authors or presenters that oftentimes are showing us high tech things that they did not make the call based on that. They based it on low tech, but they're not showing us the low tech. They're showing the high tech. And instead of showing the low tech going, well, this is how I figured it out, but I kind of think I could have done it with this. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's a scenario where the high-tech way would have been quicker if you could have made the call And then that's important to learn. But, a lot of times it's the opposite. A lot of times the low tech is fast, just as accurate than the high tech. The high tech takes longer to do, more convoluted, if you will. And then you're stuck where you may have to go low tech just to make sure.
Right.
Where if you're doing this like on a Saturday or after hours, go ballistic, go crazy. Yeah, go ballistic. We're quoting Top Gun on this here podcast. I mean, go ballistic. Try stuff out. Sharpen your skills on when you do have to go high tech or use that piece of equipment. But, when you're there trying to produce, I think sometimes you got to forego that. Maybe come back later to satisfy some curiosity.
Yeah, you might have 10 more cars you got to look at, right?
Yeah.
Get it done as fast as you can. Whatever test you have, just prove it. It doesn't really matter. Do you think that some of the training that we have today and the way that it's advertised, it's almost like trainers feel like they have to be, quote, high tech to get their classes heard or to get any attention? Do you think that's a problem, Matt?
Yeah. I think technicians, shop owners, attendees, consumers of training have put those guys, the instructors, those people, training developers in that position of I have to blow their hair back, because if I put on this intro to whatever drivability basic techniques, nobody's going to attend. Or the ones that do attend, if they're fairly, they kind of know all these techniques already, they're going to leave me a bad review because they didn't learn anything. Even though the content might be perfectly fine. It's 100% accurate. But I paid money to go to this basic class and I didn't learn anything. And I'm not, a basic tech. And that gets weird too, because how many technicians do you run into that actually say, I don't really know much about this stuff, or I'm kind of an intro level on this area.
Many, we all have these huge egos, don't we?
Yeah.
That we have to somehow navigate and manage. I think we all have a chip on our shoulders. I think we're all cut from that same cloth in some way, shape, or form. Mainly because, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, we just don't want to be wrong in what we're doing and what we're saying, because if we're wrong, then the car's not getting fixed. Yep. So it's right. We don't want to be wrong.
Yeah. And we're not doctors. I can't say try it for 2 weeks, come back. If it's not right, we'll try something else.
Matt, most doctors are parts changers, man.
Yeah, I know.
They are. I'm telling you. It's awful, but
and they have the benefit where you might just get better on your own. I'm going to give you some of these antibiotics, but you're probably going to get better on your own anyways. But I look like the hero,
right. No, it's funny as you're talking, as trainers might think what you were saying about getting bad reviews about, a basic class. It's funny how many people still to this day, in the world I live in, I see it, on a global scale, how many technicians don't understand voltage drops and how to do basic voltage measurements. I hate to put a number on that, but it's the majority. It is absolutely the majority of seasoned veteran technicians that still are not properly measuring voltage on anything.
Yep, I agree. It's hard to do. I think it'd be expensive to do. I think it's needed. Because I think that's the most reasonable way to do it is at the larger training conventions. I'm going to call out specific companies. Not that that's their fault, but I think they're in the best position to help. Tech and Console Lab that can provide people hands-on electrical classes that would involve heavy use of voltage drop and could illustrate. I go back to that video because I love it. I really do. Where you're talking about circuit analysis and the test light, the meter, scope. It's very reasonable for them to have. So ATEC and Console Lab build these tabletop trainers. I think that's what they're called. It's trainers. And they might be circuits. ATEC, the one I've used that I saw, I thought was brilliant, is a tabletop circuit board, essentially, that you kind of assemble. and it has a laptop connected to it, and it has some procedures in it that you do for finding faults, assembling the circuit. So the one I did was like a horn circuit. So there's a relay on there and a horn that kind of squawks and a button, and you hook the leads up, and then it has you go through some steps of testing. And when you get through that, the instructor can use their laptop that's networked with everybody and start bugging your circuits. And you have to figure it out using a voltmeter, or you could use a test light, or you could use a scope, like a U-scope, which would be simple, right? And then Console Lab has the more elaborate type things where they have almost an entire system that's tabletop. So an entire ignition system, an entire fuel system for testing. But it's the same thing they could do. I just think it'd be really expensive, but man, have that practical. Go through some theoretical, talk about, I don't know if you have to get into like deep numbers, but the concepts, strong concepts on Ohm's law. Mm-hmm. And then practical, and let people associate that. And now we're going to do things, we're going to tweak things, maybe not to the point of bugging yet. We're going to show you how when the ground gets worse, the voltage goes up on the ground. Depending on how we're connected. I know.
Yeah, no, for sure.
This is audio only, so it's tough.
That's the one that most people miss. Like, it's just such an easy test.
Yep. And how different referencing, like if you reference battery negative versus referencing battery positive, then the voltage drop still works. You just kind of turn around in your head what you're looking at.
Yep.
That would be very practical. I just think it would be, I don't know how expensive it is for ATEC to get 30 or 40 of these for 30 or 40 techs. And I don't know how much it would be for Console Lab to get 30 or 40 of these lined up for 30 or 40 attendees. I sat in a class at an ACAT, which is almost all college instructors. And I'm not bashing on the instructors. That's not the point of saying this. I'm just saying that in that classroom of about 20, I am the only technician in there. And who, hopefully does fairly well with electrical stuff. The classes last about an hour and a half. So I had my horn circuit going in no time, was moving on through the levels, and then I was on to turn signals and all that. Most of those instructors who needed the training, they're in there because they needed it. They're in the right place. They're in the right place. After about an hour, the main ATEC guy had to go around and help them get their circuits going. And these are the ones teaching you hate to say young people anymore. It's not young people anymore, but the people coming into the profession. And so, kudos for them to be in there because they needed it. But I think, like you're saying, this is much more prevalent throughout the profession, that if you can get these people, techs, men and women alike, in these classrooms using practical testing, and it's not even testing, it's a practical education that live, and very, very quickly see the advantage of using a test light, the advantage of using a meter, the advantage of using a scope, and how the circuit behaves with different issues. And they would, while learning also through the testing, that's, I'm going to bug this now, you have to figure it out, and finding out they can't figure it out, and learning, like, man, I bet you that room would be so bright with the light bulbs going off above people's heads, you'd have to wear welding mask.
Yeah.
I would love to see that. I don't know how you fund it.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like the companies you mentioned and those particular trainers would be perfect for a school environment like I'm in, where Rosedale Tech, say, would purchase X amount, a number of those units, and that could be then recycled for each group of students that would come through. And so then it sounds like those companies, that's really what they're set up for. Maybe not the big 100% aftermarket training events that we're talking about, but so those two companies, you guys need to contact Rosedale Technical College, and let's make something happen. We've got some serious grant money just recently. We got $1 million grant. My boss knows the president of Rosedale knows all the ins and outs of all that stuff, but we got $1 million grant to just put into the program. We're dumping that, the most of that, into our electrical program right now. We have a commercial and a like kind of building electrical program, but that's where that's going. Yeah, that was at Vision. Yeah. I was just thinking as you're talking, Matt, we should teach a class together and purposefully downplay it. Like this is the most basic class that you could ever take. Let's see how many people sign up for it. We're going to teach a basic class. I'm sure it would be far from basic, but just call it what it is, just because.
I would do that class with you in a heartbeat, especially if you do like 90% of the talking. That would be grand.
Well, one of the hard parts too for any trainer when you're trying to prep for those kind of classes is you have this fear. I know this is myself, and this is probably why I have never really gotten into the aftermarket training, is when I'm training, I know that everything that comes out of my mouth, these students need, because they're green. They've never heard it before. I know that they need it. And so I know that I'm not wasting my time in talking about the most fundamental, basic aspects of something. And when I teach maybe something that's a little bit more advanced and everyone's like, oh, that's cool, I'll take that item and really break it down to the most basic level so everyone can understand. And I always felt like maybe in our aftermarket training events that everybody already knows that. So I'm going to skip that. I think what we're seeing, Matt, what we're seeing in our field, in our industry, clearly is people need that because they're not fixing these cars.
Exactly.
And if they knew these fundamentals, they could fix these cars. Yep. So I really feel like a basic class offered as a foundational class could be a really good draw,
Yeah, I agree too, because I can only speak for Vision and only speak for Vision because Sherry told me that the number of new attendees to Vision were, immense numbers. So assuming that everyone there is top tier, not that they aren't. The fact that they're there is already puts them into a, category of top tier. But the assumption, because usually you go to these things and it's usually the same faces. Mm-hmm. They're all attending classes regularly, and it's start to assume everybody kind of knows pretty much everything you're going to say. So you're trying to get quick to the stuff that'll maybe, like I said earlier, blow their hair back. Meanwhile, you have, if the class has 50 people in it, you recognize 5. There's still 45 people that may not. And that's who you got to aim at.
45 people that definitely don't.
Yeah.
Not may not, Matt. Definitely don't. Because if they knew, then why is it 9 out of every 10 garages a customer goes to, they're not getting the right call? Why is it 9 out of every text that you take your car to can't properly troubleshoot? That's the ratio. I think that's a generous ratio. I'm not seeing it better than 10%. And that is absolutely horrible. And then we talk about all the time in our field how we want to elevate what we do. We want to elevate this trade so we can be paid what we're worth. But what we have in our own trade is those 9 people that can't troubleshoot, who hook up a scan tool, read a code, charge you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, $150 to read that code, and then they go change a part. They're doing nothing more than what the free diagnosis at the parts store does, and we're killing ourselves. So the customer doesn't recognize anything different, and that's a huge problem. Like, we can't properly charge for diagnostics when 9 other people didn't do it right. So how's the one guy that's doing it right even begin to charge properly for his diagnosis? Anyway, That's a rant.
Yeah, they're using database diagnostics. They're going to some database,
right?
Building the vehicle, punching in the symptom or the code, coming up with, almost like Family Feud style, like, what was the number 1 answer? All right, let's try that.
Right.
What is the difference between you, the professional, and the parts store that now has access to that too, depending on either the scan tool or subscriptions? Like, they can do the same thing you can now.
Right.
Yet you're trying to get, $150 or $200 an hour, whatever the diagnostic fee, $100 diagnostic fee, and they're doing it for free. Well,
yeah.
What separates you from them?
Yeah, right. And it's hard for the customer to navigate through that. I'll tell you what, when when I owned my RV, I'm glad I sold it. It's gone. It's 40 foot bus with a 8.3 Cummins engine, diesel pusher, great powertrain. But I always feared a breakdown because where is it going to go? I already knew that wherever I'm at, it's going to be towed to the nearest shop. And for example, the high pressure fuel pump on that is like $8,500. Wow. And I had a low pressure feed inlet problem. It was algae in the transfer pump that I was able to troubleshoot on my own with much aggravation and many, many hours of studying, I should say, to figure that out. And I did use some experience-based diagnostic help to see all these people, these nightmare stories with these diesel pushers who are spending $15,000 and not fixing it. It was one of my biggest fears is I'm like, I know that wherever this is going to go, it's going to go to a parts changer and he's going to freaking, do X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to be out a whole bunch of money. And it was just a stress. I just didn't want to have it anymore. And it's not like some of that stuff you can't fix out on the road. So that was really my biggest fear with that.
Yeah. And I know I come off pretty hard on database diagnostics, but I think we've all been there where you're kind of stuck, where the understanding of the system is almost non-existent. Like if a CIS engine comes in, an old Bosch CIS, there's no classes on that anymore. Experience, you see a couple a year.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I have quite a few articles on how they're supposed to work, and I try, but sometimes you just kind of got to go with, well, what's common, and now can I take what's common and can I test it and verify it, and
that's the difference.
Hopefully that raises that up to more of a professional level. But it's not like, my favorite example. And I know I probably beat it to death. My favorite example is if you had a Chrysler, if we go back late 80s, early 90s, I think, would set TPS codes in the ECM, throttle position sensor. If you looked at scan data, it would be railed 5 volts. If you measured it with your meter or scope or whatever at the sensor, it's like 1.5 volts. Very reasonable. It would be very, very difficult not to slam an engine control module at that. And lots of engine control modules got slammed in those things. It makes perfect sense. However, the fix ends up being a clock spring.
Yeah.
The airbag clock spring fixes the car. So unless you have like intimate knowledge of the architecture of the engine control module and specifically the cruise control, you find out that internal to the module, one of the legs of the chips, IC chips, is shared between the TPS and the cruise control. And what happens is the clock spring shorts, sends 12 volts in on that wire. Well, it's not going to read 12 volts. It's a 5-volt circuit, right? So the PCM perceives this as railed high, 5 volts, TPS codes. Yeah. How would you ever fix that?
Not without a good diagram, unless,
you're looking at the guts. I mean, there it is, that database, like you look it up and it's, Well,
I think the difference with the database with guys like you and me and many of our listeners is we will take the database and then go one step further.
Yeah.
Use that as our guide. And I think the database, when it's done that way, is such a huge advantage. It's like, well, it's either this, or this. And we say to ourselves, well, okay, that makes sense. And here's why that makes sense. And I'm going to go test that and prove it. And that's what we do. I mean, and so then it makes that database helpful as opposed to guys that are reading the code and seeing the database and just changing the top number because they don't know how to test it. They only have a piece of information. They don't know how to verify that, So I'm with you on the database. It's good and bad. Good for us to troubleshoot. It's bad for those that can't troubleshoot,
I agree. Yeah. And I had another quick example. It involves ABS again. I made a post a little bit about it on Tech Feed. that, again, with the scopes or meters or whatnot, that if you're chasing down like an ABS sensor issue, it might have, and I would say almost exclusively more the MR sensor types, because the VRS stuff is pretty easy to figure out one way or another. MR can be a little more difficult. That there's no shame. In actuality, there's probably a lot of logic. You've got 3 more sensors on the car. You can jumper wire the other side that you know works to the side that doesn't work and verify wiring or whatever and pretty much prove the sensor is bad or you have a wiring issue that you need to start tracking down. I think, another angle of this is there's almost some shame in that simple test, that non-sophisticated testing that accomplishes the same thing or better with less.
Why is that, Matt? Why are we shameful of those? We shouldn't be.
Should not be.
Yeah.
I mean, you post that up on Facebook group or, I think even back in the day on IETN, you'd have probably been shunned by a few. I don't know. I guess somehow we associate that with not being professional or, like you said, if we're trying to elevate ourselves, this is how we're going to do the test. Yeah. You know what? They checked my blood pressure at the doctor the same way they did when my dad was a kid. So it's not even digital.
Right. Let's not forget about the old tests, man, for sure. I mean, as high tech as things, have gotten, there's just so many foundational things that just still work, man. And the stuff technology is increasing tremendously. But what's funny is as I start to see newer technology, because I'm further behind than I ever been. I'm not on the front lines anymore. But when I see this stuff, I'm just reminded, like, this isn't anything new. This is new in this area. This is new application of this same thing that I understood on a 1985 feedback carburetor.
Yep.
It's still there. There it is. Oh, okay. Yep. So, fundamentals, man, I always say that, and that's kind of what, your title to this podcast is really, is it kind of ties into that too, is don't forget the older stuff that you learned. You might not need all that high tech stuff. We're not bashing the high tech stuff. Matt and I use it all the time, but man, don't forget about your older tests that you've learned that are tried and true and still work and might save you a whole crap ton of time. And don't be ashamed of it, right? Isn't just like you just said, don't be ashamed of it. Why should we be? If it works and it's 100% with no variables, then why are you making an apology for it?
Yeah.
Right?
Nothing to apologize for.
Right.
That's all. Like, this is a perfect note to end on. I really appreciate you coming on again, sir.
Well, I appreciate your time, Matt, and I'm serious about a basic vision class. We should do that.
I got an email that the floodgates are open. So,
well, I said no to everyone. I get all kind of requests for me to do training outside, and I don't have the time. I'm so buried in what I do, and but that's something I would consider. I'm not going to publicly say I'm going to say yes to that, but I would consider doing a class with you if it was along those lines, because we need to lift the trade. That's what you're doing, and I think it's awesome to have another avenue and resource like you have here with this podcast that guys like us can listen to when we're doing other things. And, and here's a tip for you guys out there that are listening. I don't know how long this is going to be, but if you listen to it in 1.5 times the speed or even 2 times the speed, you can get through it twice as fast. That'd be for my viewers too, who blame me for being long-winded. My son even calls me Captain Longwind. So I just tell those viewers that if it's too long of a video, just watch it in double time. And you can watch a 40-minute video in 20 minutes and still get the same info. So
does he sound
technology is cool.
Elvin or Simon?
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny when I edit videos, like I do that when Caleb and I share, like he'll be working from home. He sends me what he has. I'll watch myself in double time because I want to get through it as quick as possible. I know what I'm looking for. I know what I need. And then I'm used to hearing myself with a chipmunk voice. So
that's
in
awesome.
fact, I think I did that with you and Brandon's one because it was real long and I didn't have much time. I had about 40 minutes and I did you guys on a ×2 on that.
It probably needed it. I mean, it was
great. It was such a good podcast, but I just, again, for what you're doing, Matt, I think it's great. And you are elevating the industry and what you're doing. And I'm just glad to be here and be part of it. So anytime you want me on, you got me.
Awesome. What are you doing tomorrow? Just kidding. But yeah, I really appreciate that. I can't thank you enough, not only for coming on, but really seriously, everything you do. I mean that wholeheartedly, no smoke involved. I really, really do appreciate everything you're doing. And if there's any way I can ever help, please don't ever hesitate to ask.
I won't, Matt. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you too, buddy.
All right.
We'll talk soon about the class.
Sounds good. I look forward to that.
Okay, buddy.
All right,
I'll talk to you soon. Man. Okay.
You've been listening to Matt Fonslow, diagnosing the aftermarket A to Z on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Matt on your favorite listening app. He's very interested in what you have to say. Let him know what you'd like him to cover and come on the show. Matt is all for advancing the aftermarket. Find Matt Fonslow on social media and connect or on aftermarketradionetwork.com.